Hello, I'm Alex. I got two hands. How about you? Pretty much all our FromSoft game heroes have two hands as well. Even Wolf. Sort of. And you know what people have always loved to do in RPGs, as far back as I can remember? Dual wield. For whatever reasons, dual wielding is always one of the most popular sorts of builds in any kind of RPG. Because what's better than one sword? What's better than one gun? Two, apparently. Look, I don't quite get it because I'm more of a two-handed spear sort of guy. Or a two-handed axe sort of guy. But a stocky dwarf dual-wielding an axe and a mace, like a slayer, sure, that's cool. And this is a mechanic that FromSoft games have dabbled in, now and then. Dark Souls and Demon Souls allowed you to equip just about anything per limb, but there was no dedicated dual-wield support. Sure, sometimes there might be reasons to do it, like an L1 attack coming out faster or something, but I think it's safe to say that dual wielding in Dark Souls was fairly bare bones. A long time ago, I did make a, kind of a Jetstream Sam themed character for a challenge run I was doing for Dark Souls. It was a very easy challenge run compared to the things people do these days, whereas I beat Elden Ring whilst blindfolded and blowing at the keyboard really powerfully. But this was a long time ago, and it was fun, and my character was using two katanas, one in each hand. It was fun, and it wasn't ineffective. But it was with Dark Souls 2 that we got our first look at dual wielding as a proper mechanic. The vaunted power stancing of Drang Lake. In Dark Souls 2, you could put two weapons of the same category in either hand. They didn't have to be the same weapon, just the same weapon type, like two straight swords, two clubs, two curved swords, you get the idea. And if you held down triangle, or Y, you would enter the power stance, which gave you access to new attacks. And unlike in Dark Souls 1, where this was mostly a fringe case sort of thing, it was actually really powerful in Dark Souls 2. Again, going back 10 years to my boss guides for Dark Souls 2, well, they heavily featured power stancing, power stance clubs to be precise, because good lord, they were supreme bonkers. But you could do it with just about anything, and it was a very popular gameplay mechanic, and I think, of everything people give Dark Souls 2 grief for, power stancing may be one of the only things that is universally loved about that game, or at least appreciated, right? I've never heard anyone complain about it, and well, if you are someone who doesn't like power stancing, let me know why down in the comments. See, Dark Souls 2 had a lot of experimental features and design choices. Not many of them worked out, unfortunately. Like soul memory, it was a cool idea, didn't really work, but I like to think that soul memory led them to the superior scaling they used in later games. The reason why soul memory exists is valid, but we just need a better form of execution, and that's what they got in Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring. So yeah, not many of the experiments Dark Souls 2 tried, worked. The power stancing sure did. That said, it never quite made a return, at least not in the same form. Dark Souls 3 worked more like Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1, but they introduced paired weapons. When wielded with one hand, you would use them with one hand. It would be, a curved sword with your standard curved sword stuff, but when you hit the stance button, instead of wielding one weapon with both hands, you would unsheath the second weapon, the paired weapon, and get access to a power stance style moveset. This was quite limited in Dark Souls 3, in the sense that you could only do it with paired weapons, whereas Dark Souls 2 allowed you to power stance effectively anything. I think there were around 20 paired weapons in Dark Souls 3, if I'm counting them off in my head, including the DLC weapons. They were effective, though. The Sellsword Twin Blades are a notorious Dark Souls 3 weapon in how good they were. And once again, I used dual wielding for my boss guide videos, but instead of clubs, I went with the Warden Twin Blades. A little tricky to acquire, maybe, as they needed a bit of grinding, but all you needed really was patience at the end of the day. They were tremendous weapons. I think paired weapons were inferior to power stancing, but they were certainly something interesting and new. But moving on, Bloodborne, Shadows Die Twice, and so on, they didn't really do anything new there. But then when Elden Ring came out a few years ago, it used a system that was kind of like a hybrid of Dark Souls 2 and 3. For the most part, you can equip any weapon of the same category in your left and your right hands and get new moves, just like in Dark Souls 2. But you don't enter the power stance, you're just kind of always in it if you have the appropriate weapons equipped. But you also get paired weapons, such as most fist and claw weapons in the game. That works rather well, right? The best of both worlds. It gives you player freedom. What do you think? Do you prefer paired weapons, or being able to mix and match, like in Elden Ring and Dark Souls 2, in your left and right hands for dual wielding purposes? Elden Ring's system is superior to Dark Souls 3, in my opinion, as it's a lot less limited. If you want to dual wield colossal weapons, you can. And boy, people sure do. The power stance jump attacks remain pretty good to this day. People are sure doing it in Night Rain. Dark Souls 3 only had one weapon, really, that worked for sort of like a colossal double weapon, and you only got that at the very end of the last DLC. But what about future games? How can we improve upon it from here? Can we improve upon it? If you look at other games, or even modded weapons that the community have made for Elden Ring and stuff, there's some really cool and exciting things that From could take inspiration from, or at least it shows that there is maybe room to improve, right? But a lot of that comes down to just the movesets and giving us more options, more so than the actual mechanics of dual wielding, in my opinion. Elden Ring's system is fairly well developed in allowing player freedom, which I've said a few times in this video, and that is, to me, the important part. Elden Ring, Dark Souls, these are all role-playing games. The idea is you play your character, you build them however you want. It's not about, player choices in the narrative so much. It's about player choices in how you build and present your character, having loads of freedom. Do you want to be someone who uses a Zweihander in one hand and shoots magic with the other? You can do that. Do you want to use 2 daggers, but also heavy armor? You can do that. It's very freeform, and I think that's been a big part of why these games are so enjoyed, so loved, and cherished by people. Elden Ring is, for a lot of people, not just their game of the year, but their game of the generation. It's their favourite game of all time. And I think if you take away the freedom, people will like it a lot less. But going back a bit, this all shows us how they've advanced over the years. Look at Dark Souls 1, dual wielding, then look at Elden Rings. But to some extent, this also highlights the issue of, what can we even call it? Power creep in movesets? Look at movesets in Dark Souls compared to Elden Ring. What's the flashiest thing you really have in Dark Souls? I don't know, is it the quick draw attack with the Iaito? We've gotten a lot more flashy and advanced with more kind of stances and special attacks and weapon arts and so on. Even if we're nowhere near the level of complexity of, say, Neo. But at the same time, look at enemy movesets. If we went from 1 to 4 with our own emotions, enemies went from 1 to 100. Look at what Radahn is doing at the end of the DLC. Look what Melania is doing. Look what these crazy things these bosses are doing. Like R'hllana. Goodness. Some of the boss combos and movesets are so outrageous and over the top and cool, but we're kind of still stuck here mostly flailing around with little waddles. There's a disparity there which I think to some extent should be addressed in future games. The gap between player and enemy should be just that. A gap that you can step over, not a canyon that you would need to launch yourself over with a trebuchet. And again, another good example here is Ninja Gaiden. The things that you can do and the things that the enemies can do in Ninja Gaiden are very similar. Now, again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying Elden Ring 2 needs to play like Ninja Gaiden in terms of, speed and intensity. What I'm saying is that the players and the bosses should be on a more level playing field, as that's always something that I thought was really appealing about the earlier games. When you're fighting the knights and the enemy bosses in Dark Souls and Demon Souls, they feel like they're on your level. They're bigger, they're stronger, they have better equipment, but it doesn't feel like you are just a dude and they are some anime character, whereas that kind of happens in Elden Ring. And whether it's making the characters more flashy or the bosses less so, I would like to see that in Elden Ring 2, Electric Boogaloo. Still, let me know your thoughts in the comments. What's your favourite dual wielding mechanic in Souls games? Or indeed, any game? Until next time, thanks so much for watching. Ciao.